Your inability to focus is not a disorder. It is not a disease. It is not even a weakness. It is a symptom of a mind that has been trained to fracture. You were not born distracted. You were made this way by a world that profits from your scattered attention. But here is what that world does not want you to know. Focus is not a talent you either have or lack. It is a practice, refined through discipline, like drawing or music or the working of stone. I learned this truth not from books, but from decades spent with chisel, brush, and page. And today, I will teach you what those decades taught me, that reclaiming your focus is reclaiming your humanity. My name is Leonardo, and I have spent my life in the pursuit of understanding. I painted faces that seemed to breathe. I designed machines that would not fly until centuries after my death. I dissected the human body to learn how blood moves through the heart. But none of this came from talent alone. It came from something far more valuable, the ability to hold one thing before my mind until it revealed its secrets. This is what I wish to teach you today. Not tricks, not shortcuts, but a method. The same method I used when I painted the Last Supper. The same method I used when I studied the flight of birds for 6 years. When you finish this teaching, you will not have a list of clever techniques to try once and forget. You will have something that can change your life if you will use it. I will show you why you lost focus in the first place. Not because you are weak, but because you were never taught that attention is a muscle that atrophies when not exercised with intention. You live in a world designed to fracture your gaze. I will show you how to resist this. I will show you the difference between shallow seeing and deep observation. You look at 1,000 things each day and see none of them. You glance at a face and think you have seen it, but you have not. You have registered an image, but you have not observed. True observation requires that you stop, that you return again and again to the same thing until it opens to you. This is how I learned anatomy, not from books, but from the body itself. I will teach you what it means to observe a single thing so completely that it reveals the principles underlying all things. I will give you the ancient practice I used to train unshakable concentration. Each morning, before rising from my bed, I would lie in the darkness and reconstruct in my mind everything I had learned the day before. I would hold this image, and when my thoughts wandered, I would notice and return. This simple practice made my daytime observation infinitely more powerful. I will give you this exact method. I will show you why focus is not discipline but devotion. You think focus requires force, but when you truly wish to understand a thing, concentration is not effortful, it is inevitable. A young boy watching an anthill does not struggle to pay attention. This is the secret. The deepest focus comes not from forcing the mind, but from falling in love with what you study. I will show you how to cultivate this quality of attention, and I will teach you how to see errors in your own work without losing heart. I kept a mirror by my easel to see my painting reversed, as if made by another hand. This revealed flaws invisible to my accustomed eye. I will teach you this principle, how to step outside your own perspective so that you may correct without despair. You seek focus because you feel you have lost something essential. You are correct, but what you have lost is not beyond recovery. It is only buried beneath habit, beneath haste, beneath the belief that depth is no longer possible in a world of surfaces. Depth is still possible. Focus is still possible, but not through wishing, only through practice. Daily practice. Patient practice. Are you ready? Then let us begin. When I was a young man, I worked in the studio of Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. He was one of the most celebrated masters of our time. I was fortunate to be accepted into his workshop, but I was also arrogant. I believed I already knew how to see. My hand was quick, my eye was sharp, or so I thought. One day, Messer Andrea gave me a task. He was painting a large altarpiece showing St. John baptizing our Savior. He asked me to paint one of the angels. Just one. I thought this would take me a day. Perhaps two. I was young. I did not yet understand what seeing truly meant. I began by sketching the angel quickly, confidently. I gave it a beautiful face, flowing robes, and two wings. I was pleased. But when I began to paint the wings, I realized I had a problem. I did not actually know what a wing looked like. Oh, I could draw the general shape everyone can. But when I tried to paint it with precision, I discovered that I knew nothing. How do the feathers overlap? Where do they attach? How does light pass through them? I had looked at birds 1,000 times in my life, but I had never truly observed them. I had glanced, so I left the studio and went to the market. I stood there for hours, watching. I bought a dove and brought it back. I watched it spread its wings. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. The other apprentices had finished their portions, but I was still working on one wing. I began to understand something that changed my life. What appears simple is infinitely complex when you try to represent it truly. The world is not made of simple shapes. It is made of details within details. And if you wish to paint truly, you must see truly. And to see truly, you must look far longer than you think necessary. I studied how light caught each feather. I studied how white feathers near the body differed from long flight feathers at the wing's tip. And slowly, I began to paint, not from imagination, but from observation, not from what I thought a wing should look like. When I finally finished, 3 weeks had passed. 3 weeks for one wing. I was exhausted, but I was also changed. Messer Andrea came to look. He stood in silence for a long time. Then he looked at his own portion of the painting. He looked back at my angel, and then he set down his brush. He cleaned his hands carefully. He removed his smock, and he said to me, "You have learned what I spent 20 years. I did not understand at the time. But years later, I did." He saw that I had learned the fundamental lesson of all mastery, that perfection is not talent, it is the willingness to return again and again to the same small thing until it becomes luminous. This is what focus truly means. Not the ability to start something. Everyone can start, but the ability to return when returning is difficult. When returning is boring, when everything in you wants to move on to something new. You have this same capacity, but you have forgotten how to use it. You have been trained to move quickly from one thing to another, to sample rather than to savor. This is not your fault. but it is your responsibility to change it. Now, let me tell you a harder story, a story of failure. Many years later, I was living in Milan, working for Duke Ludovico Sforza. He commissioned me to create a bronze equestrian statue more than 20 feet tall, perhaps the largest bronze casting ever attempted. I threw myself into the work with passion. I studied horses every day. I made hundreds of drawings. This was to be my masterpiece. But here is what happened. As I worked on the horse, other interests began to call to me. I became fascinated with fortifications. I began studying geometry. I accepted a commission to paint a portrait. I started designing theatrical productions. Each project seemed important at the time. And slowly, without my noticing, the horse began to sit abandoned in my studio. I would return to it occasionally, work on it for a few days, then drift away again. I told myself I was gathering knowledge that would make the final work better, but I was lying to myself. The truth was that I had fallen in love with the easy excitement of beginning new things, and I had lost the harder discipline of finishing what I had started. Years passed. The clay model was completed and stood in the courtyard, but the bronze was never cast. Do you know why? Because when the French army invaded Milan, the Duke needed bronze not for art, but for cannons. The metal that was to have been my monument was melted down for weapons, and the clay model I had worked on for years stood there until French soldiers used it for target practice. Within a few years, it had crumbled into dust. I stood in that courtyard, looking at the ruins of my horse, and I felt a shame so deep I cannot fully describe it. Not because it was destroyed by others that was beyond my control, but because I had destroyed it myself years before through my inability to focus. If I had cast it when I should have, it would have been completed, but because I scattered my energy across a dozen lesser things, I had nothing. Nothing but regret. I made a vow that day. I vowed that I would never again abandon important work for trivial distractions. I vowed that I would develop a daily discipline to train my mind to stay with what mattered. Understand this. Distraction is not innocent. Every time you begin something and abandon it for something easier, you are training your mind to quit. You are digging a groove in your consciousness that makes quitting easier the next time, until you become someone who begins everything and finishes nothing. So we must break this pattern. After my failure with the horse, I made a solemn practice. Every morning, before I touched brush or pen, I would train my mind. I would lie in my bed in the darkness before dawn, and in that silence, I would choose one thing I had studied the previous day. If I had been studying the anatomy of the arm, I would picture the bones, their shapes, how they connected at the elbow, the muscles that wrapped around them, and I would try to hold this image steady in my mind. But I discovered something quickly. My mind did not want to stay still. Within moments, it would wander. I would be visualizing the bones, and suddenly I would be thinking about the market or remembering something someone said. The mind, left to itself, is like a bird that cannot stay on one branch. But here is what I learned. This wandering is not a problem to be solved. It is a condition to be observed. Every time my mind wandered, I did not curse myself. Instead, I would notice where my mind had gone, and then, gently, I would bring it back. back to the bones of the arm. Sometimes my mind wandered 10 times in as many minutes. But I did this every morning without fail for 15 or 20 minutes. And something remarkable happened. Over weeks, my ability to hold the image grew stronger. My mind still wandered, but I caught it more quickly. And when I sat down to work, I found that my observations were sharper. This is what I mean when I say focus is a practice. It is not something you have or lack. It is something you train. Just as you train your body to lift heavy things, you train your mind to hold attention by practicing holding attention in stillness, in silence, before the demands of the day pull you in every direction. Let me tell you what this practice revealed. Memory and attention are not separate things. They are two faces of the same capacity. When you practice holding an image in your mind, you strengthen your memory. And when you strengthen your memory, you strengthen your ability to observe, because observation requires that you notice what is in front of you now and compare it to what you have seen before. After months of morning practice, when I looked at a dissected arm, I no longer saw chaos. I saw a system. I could recognize each muscle because I had held its image in my mind 100 times. The overwhelm disappeared, and in its place came understanding. Now, you might be thinking, but Leonardo, I am not studying anatomy. How does this apply to me? And I say, this applies to everything. If you are learning mathematics, the same principle holds. If you are learning music, the same principle holds. The mind must be trained to hold one thing steadily. Without this capacity, all your efforts will be scattered. You will know many things shallowly and nothing deeply, and here is the truth no one wishes to hear. Depth is where all real value lives. Breadth is easy. Anyone can sample 100 subjects, but mastery requires that you go deep into one thing. So deep that you understand not just the surface, but the principles underneath. And you cannot go deep without the ability to focus. So these three stories have taught me three practices woven together like the strands of a rope. First, the practice of return. Second, the practice of observation. And third, the practice of withdrawal. Let me unfold each of these now. The first practice is the principle of return. When I say you have forgotten how to focus, what I mean precisely is this. You have forgotten how to return. You still begin things, everyone begins. But when difficulty arrives, when boredom whispers, when the new and shining calls from the corner of your eye, you do not return to what you started. You abandon it, half finished, and call yourself curious. But this is not curiosity. It is cowardice, dressed in the costume of interest. The painter who quits his work when it becomes difficult will never see past the surface. I studied water for 30 years, not in 30 separate studies, but in one continuous returning. Every time I set down my notebook on hydraulics, I would return to it where I left off, building understanding layer by layer, like the rings of a tree. Think about this carefully. A tree does not grow by starting over each spring. It adds a new ring to what already exists. This is how understanding grows. But you have been taught to seek novelty, to believe that if something becomes difficult or boring, you should move on. This is a lie. Difficulty and boredom are not signs that you should quit. They are signs that you are approaching the threshold where real learning begins. When I studied bird wings for 6 years, do you think every day was exciting? No. Many days I was bored. Many days I thought, I already understand wings. But I returned. And because I returned, I saw things in the 6th year that I could not have seen in the 1st year. And eventually, I understood not just how birds fly, but why they fly the way they do. This only happened because I returned. So I ask you now, what have you begun that you have not finished? What work sits abandoned because it became hard? This is where you must return, not to start over, but to continue from where you left off. Because every time you finish something difficult, you are training your mind that completion is possible. Choose one thing right now, one project, one skill, one area of study that you have abandoned. Not 10 things, one thing, and commit to returning to it every day for 30 days. Not for hours, even 20 minutes is enough. But you must return. The returning itself is the practice. Can you do this? If you cannot, then you do not yet understand what focus requires. But if you can, you will discover something remarkable. By the end of 30 days, that thing which seemed boring will have opened to you. Here is a question that will reveal everything. Can you spend 1 hour on a single page, a single sketch, a single thought? Most of you cannot. Your mind will rebel after 10 minutes. This is not your fault. The second practice is the unity of observation and understanding. You believe that you understand a thing when you can name it. This is the first error. I can say to you the muscle of the upper arm and you nod, thinking you comprehend. But do you know how it attaches to the bone? No. You have a name, not knowledge. True focus is not reading about a thing, it is looking at the thing until the thing teaches you. Listen carefully. There is no separation between seeing and knowing in nature. When I studied anatomy, I did not read Galen and copy his words. I cut into the body and let the body speak. This is why my notebooks contain drawings, not essays. Because the eye learns what words cannot teach. You suffer from a modern disease, consuming information without observation. You read about things. You watch videos about things, but you do not actually look at things. You mistake description for experience. But I tell you that a student who reads 100 books on birds knows less than one who spent 1 month watching a single falcon. Let me tell you the practice I used. Before studying any subject, I would look at it in silence for 1 full hour. I would draw it without labels, without theory, only what I saw. Only after this would I consult text to see if the masters agreed with my eyes. And you know what I discovered? More often than not, the masters were wrong and nature was correct. They had copied from each other, repeating errors, because none of them had taken the time to actually look. So here's your practice. Take any object, even something you think you understand, a cup, your hand, a leaf. Observe it for 20 minutes before reading anything about it. Draw it or describe it, recording only what you actually perceive. Then read what others have written, and I promise you will be shocked at how much you missed. but also shocked at how much they missed. When you practice this regularly, you begin to trust your own perception more than the words of authorities. You begin to see that the world is not as simple as books describe it, and this makes you humble, but also confident. Humble because you realize how much there is to see. Confident because you realize you are capable of seeing it. The third practice is the method of stepping away. Too great application and sitting still is sometimes the cause of many gross errors. You think focus means grinding until exhaustion. It does not. I learned this when I would paint for 12 hours and find the next morning that what I thought was brilliant was actually crude. The mind that does not rest cannot judge. Paradoxically, one of the secrets of sustained focus is knowing when to release it. The mind needs distance to see clearly. This is why I kept a mirror by my easel. When I would look at my painting in the mirror, seeing it reversed, it was as if another person had painted it. Suddenly I could see imbalances, errors in proportion, places where the light did not fall correctly. But the mirror was only one method. The other was to leave the studio entirely, to walk, to think about other things. And many of my best insights came not while I was working, but while I was not working. While walking along the river, a solution would suddenly appear in my mind. Why? The mind continues processing beneath consciousness when you step away. It is like setting bread dough aside to rise. Nothing appears to be happening, but transformation is occurring. Let me give you the precise practice. I would work on one thing with complete attention for a fixed period. 90 minutes was ideal. At the end, I would step away completely, not to read about related work, but to leave the work entirely. I would walk outside. I would work in the garden. Anything that gave my mind a different engagement. And I discovered something important. If I stayed in my studio thinking about other projects, this was not a true break. But if I did something physical, something that required my attention differently, then when I returned to the work, I was truly refreshed. My eye was sharp again. I could see what I could not see before. Compare this to the modern era. The student who sits for 6 hours, distracted half the time, achieves less than the one who works for 2 hours with full presence, then takes a true break, then works for 2 more hours. Quality of attention is worth more than quantity of time. I produced few works compared to some contemporaries, but those few arrested the eye of every beholder, because I knew when to work and when to let the work rest. So here is your practice. For 1 week, try this rhythm. Choose 45 minutes of focused work on one thing only. When the time ends, step away completely. For 15 minutes, go outside, move your body. When the 15 minutes end, return with fresh eyes. Notice what you could not see before. Keep a notebook and record what you notice after each break. You will discover the break is not wasted time. It is part of the focusing process itself. The mind sharpens during withdrawal and cuts deeper during return. Now I will give you the precise practices I use to train my own attention. These are simple, but simplicity does not mean easy. If you do them for 30 days without stopping, you will recover what you have lost. I promise you this. The first practice is the morning visualization. Each morning, before you rise, lie still with your eyes closed. Choose one thing you studied the previous day. Hold this image in your mind with as much detail as you can recall. When your mind wanders, and it will note where it went, then return. Do not judge yourself. Simply notice and return. Spend 10 to 15 minutes doing this. Then rise and immediately draw or write what you visualized. Compare it to the original. Why does this work? It strengthens memory, which strengthens observation. It trains the return reflex, the ability to notice distraction and come back, and it prepares the mind for focused work. The focused work you do later becomes easier because you have already practiced holding attention in the quiet of the morning. Here is what you will notice. The first days will feel impossible. Your mind will scatter like leaves in wind. This is normal. But if you continue, something shifts. By the second week, you will hold the image longer. By the end of 1 month, you will find that your daytime focus has doubled. The second practice is a single object study. Choose one natural object, a leaf, a stone, your own hand. Sit before it with pen and paper. For 30 minutes, do nothing but observe and draw. Draw it from multiple angles. Draw it in different light. When boredom arises, and it will acknowledge it and return. Do this daily for 7 days with the same object. Yes, the same object. Why does this work? It reveals how shallow your normal seeing is. On the first day, you will think you have drawn everything. On the second day, you will notice things you missed. On the third day, you will see even more. By the seventh day, you will look at this object with astonishment, realizing it contains more complexity than you ever imagined. Here is what you will notice. You will resist this practice. Your mind will call it tedious, boring, pointless. This resistance is precisely what you must move through. On the other side of boredom is revelation. The object will begin teaching you things about form, The third practice is the mirror method. After finishing any work, a piece of writing, a drawing, a project, step away for at least 1 hour. Then when you return, view it in reverse. If it is a drawing, hold it up to a mirror. If it is writing, read it backwards. If it is something you cannot reverse, show it to someone else and watch their face. The goal is to see your work as if you are not the creator, but a stranger. Why does this work? The mind grows accustomed to its own work and stops seeing errors. You know what you meant to create, so you see your intention rather than what you actually created. But when you reverse it, the spell breaks. You see it as it truly is. Here is what you will notice. Your first reaction will be shock at how much you missed. Do not be discouraged. This is not failure. This is the beginning of true sight. Each time you practice this, you will catch errors faster. Eventually, you will train your eye to see clearly even without the mirror. These 3 practices work together. The morning practice trains your attention and stillness. The daytime practice trains your observation and engagement. The evening practice trains your judgment and reflection. Together, they form a complete cycle. But they only work if you do them daily, for at least 30 days without stopping. Now I must speak to you seriously about what is at stake. You seek to focus because you know your scattered attention is costing you something precious. You are right. It is costing you mastery. It is costing you the joy of completion. It is costing you the ability to do one thing so well that it arrests the eye and heart of every beholder. When you cannot focus, you cannot go deep. And when you cannot go deep, you remain on the surface of everything. You know a little about many things, but nothing about anything. Nothing great has ever been created by someone who knew a little about everything. Greatness comes from depth, from obsessive attention to one thing until you understand it better than anyone else. The world does not need more people who know a little about many things. The world needs people who know one thing deeply enough to advance it. But you cannot become this person if you cannot focus. You will remain forever a beginner, starting things and abandoning them, impressed by your own breath, but accomplishing nothing of lasting value. I do not say this to shame you. I say it because I see your potential. I see someone who could create remarkable things if only they could hold their attention long enough, if only they understood that the ability to focus is not a convenience but a necessity. You have limited time on this earth, fewer years than you think, and every day that you spend scattered is a day you cannot reclaim. I am not telling you to abandon joy or rest. I am telling you to stop wasting your attention on things that do not matter, to choose one thing or very few things and give them your full presence. This is not limitation. This is liberation. When I painted The Last Supper, I worked on it for 3 years. Some days I would paint for hours. Other days I would stand before it for an hour without adding a single brushstroke, simply looking, thinking, understanding. My patrons thought I was lazy. It required attention that cannot be rushed. And because I gave it that attention, it has lasted 500 years. This is what focus creates. Work that lasts. Work that matters. But I also created many works that I never finished. And when I look back, I do not regret the time I spent in deep focus on the few things I completed. I only regret the time I wasted on the many things I scattered my attention across without finishing. The unfinished works haunt me. They represent potential unrealized, attention squandered. So I will tell you plainly, the quality of your attention is the quality of your life. If you scatter your gaze across 1,000 surfaces, you will know only surfaces. You will live a shallow life, entertained but never satisfied. But if you fix your eye on one thing, truly and completely, you will discover that the one thing contains the whole. You will find that depth in one area teaches you about depth in all areas. This is not mysticism. This is the law of observation that I learned in 50 years of study. The universe does not hide from those who look deeply. Nature does not withhold her secrets from those who are patient, but she does not reveal them to those who are in a hurry. If you will slow down, if you will return, if you will give your full attention to one thing long enough, that one thing will teach you everything you need to know. I have given you principles today. I have given you practices. I have told you stories from my own life. But now you must decide. Will you continue as you are? Scattered, distracted, beginning many things and finishing few? Or will you make a different choice? Will you commit to the practices I have given you? Will you choose one thing to focus on and return to it every day for 30 days? I cannot make this choice for you. But I can tell you what will happen if you make it. In 30 days, you will not be the same person. You will have discovered that you are capable of sustained attention. You will have proven to yourself that focus is not a talent you lack, but a skill you can develop. And most importantly, you will have remembered what it feels like to do one thing with your whole self. So here is what I ask of you. If this teaching has served you, do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel, for I have many more lessons to share on observation, on creation, on living a life worthy of your highest capacity. Do not miss these teachings. Second, press the like button so that this wisdom may reach others who have also forgotten how to see. There are thousands suffering as you have suffered. By sharing this teaching, you help them find their way back. You become part of the chain of transmission that carries understanding from one generation to the next. And third, tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you will commit to returning to day after day until it teaches you its secrets? Write it below. Name the one thing you will focus on, and then, starting tomorrow morning, begin. Do the morning visualization. Do the single object study. Do the mirror method. Do them for 30 days. And after 30 days, come back and tell me what changed. Remember this as you go forward. Focus is not found, it is built. It is not a gift, it is a practice. It is not easy, but it is simple. Return when you leave. Observe what is actually there. Withdraw when your mind grows clouded, then return again with fresh eyes. These 3 movements, return, observe, withdraw, are the rhythm of mastery. They have created every great work in human history. They will create your great work too. I began this teaching by telling you that your inability to focus is not a disorder. It is a symptom of a mind that has been trained to fracture. But what has been trained can be retrained. What has been scattered can be gathered. What has been lost can be recovered. You were not born distracted. You learned distraction, and you can unlearn it. You can return to the natural human capacity for sustained attention. This capacity is your birthright. Reclaim it. Until we meet again, return to your work, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, today. Now, choose one thing. Sit with it. Observe it. Stay with it when it becomes difficult. So, stay with it when it becomes boring. Stay with it until it opens to you. This is the path. There is no other. Go now. Focus. Create. And remember that every moment you give your full attention is a moment you are fully alive.